Gacha. Gacha is not a video game genre. It's a system, a choice made to monetize a game that can be good or bad regardless of its gacha aspects. That choice is automatically going to make the game predatory or very predatory. Still, depending on how it's handled, a gacha game can still feel like it has its own qualities and virtues. Wuthering Waves has tons of qualities, for instance, between the complex combat system, the eye mobility, and the cinematic moments that are highlights of the recent story quests. However, everything has both pros and cons, and WuWa is the same. Hello, people of the internet. I'm Maxwell, or Max for short, and before we delve into the topic, I'd like to give a bit of context regarding this video and me as a player. I love games. Generally speaking, I'm more the kind of person that plays a game an infinite amount of time rather than buying tons of different games. If you combine the hours I played Dark Souls 1, 2 and 3, you probably go a bit over the 2000. Gacha games are more or less my kryptonite, because while they incentivize you to play every day, they don't really push you to play much each day, as the things you can do are generally limited by the stamina system. My only true experience with gachas come from Genshin Impact and Wuthering Waves. I played Genshin very early on, after my brother convinced me to give it a try, and I had fun. I remember playing with him in co-op and exploring Dragonspine together, and enjoying playing the characters I liked. I still miss you, Eula. I played about until the end of Inazuma, and then dropped it for 3 main reasons. The combat felt dull and uninteresting, and the game itself felt restrictive in too many ways. Mora, XP materials, artifacts, talent materials all felt too limited, and didn't incentivize me much into investing in other characters. The third reason is that it's basically gambling, as for every gacha, and I'm tremendously weak to it. Even now, I'm trying to hold fast and not crumble in the trap of funny horse girl game, but reading the story of Rice Shower, my will is crumbling. Some time ago I tried to go back to Genshin, because I saw Candice, and, you know, shields are cool, I love shields. But I couldn't. I was interested in the story, but it felt like I was too behind, and catching up was an Herculean task due to how slow it felt. So I said no more to gachas and put all of it behind me. Then the Wuthering Wave Nation attacked. A friend of mine was particularly excited about it and recommended it because Kuro is generous and the gameplay is more dynamic, etc, etc. I tried to push back, but in the end I caved in and tried it. I started playing around the beginning of 1.1 and found great fun in it. However, I basically spent 80% of the time being mad at it, or criticizing lots of its aspects, especially with the story and presentation. The gameplay was fun, and it was indeed quite generous in terms of gacha, but if it wasn't for my friend that was there in the early stages of the game, I would probably have quit. Now things are different. After a while, the ratio of rage and fun morphed from an 80-20 to a 20-80, with Renacita and the 2.0 as a whole being an amazing comeback, as the name suggests, a sort of rebirth of the game. This doesn't mean that the game is perfect, far from it. Also, I feel like it's pointless to say it, but I'll mention this too. In this video, I talked a bit about my experience with Genshin, and we'll talk a bit more about it later on. I do not hate Genshin, nor the people that play it. Most of my memories about it are actually really positive. I'm extremely curious in its story even after years since I abandoned it, but to this day I still think that the game in terms of gameplay has little to offer to me, and has flaws that I cannot overlook. And speaking of flaws, this is the perfect segue to talk about my critique of Wuthering Waves. I've compiled most of my grievances with the game in 5 points, from the less problematic and more like an honorable mention, to the more problematic and frustrating, in my opinion. Let's begin. This is a very minor problem for the game as a whole, but I still think it's something that should be addressed. Things like the flying challenge or that one Cathetheus scene in the first half of the 2.4 story frustrated me a bit. If there is not a way to fail, or if there is no significance in a quick-time event because succeeding or not doesn't change anything, is there even a point? One exception to me is that combo attack during the fight between Lupa and Lady of the Sea. In most cases, that quick-time event is basically a hype moment that, if executed correctly, generally lands as soon as the guitar solo kicks in. It has some purpose, even if it's just for the hype. However, I cannot say the same for things like the flight challenge. At least call them, I don't know, flight tours, in which you basically have to give minimal input to succeed perfectly, because they are no challenge. Again, this is a very minor problem, and one that I just wanted to mention. Like all gachas, the game wants you to spend in a way or another. In comparison to Genshin, Wuwa feels surely more generous in my experience. I have a job, I have some money, so I'm not afraid to spend some when I feel like it, even if, of course, I try not to overdo it. Wuwa, for instance, is the kind of game in which going for a sequence node is something that doesn't feel unreal, all thanks to the fact that you can buy a couple of them in the shop. The guaranteed weapon banner is also really good, and a topic of relevance is the fact that this game has great quality. You can forget the wall gacha system if you want. Around the beginning of 1.3, I pulled on the Shorekeeper banner to get Tao Chi. Yes, you heard that right. No, it's not for the gooning, it's for the pairing. I decided that I will hoard all my currency until I had found a character that I cared enough to get as many sequences as I could. It took me the coming of the 2.1 update, when I had the chance to throw something like 400 convenes on the Peeb, and now I have the equivalent of a tactical nuke made magical girl. Between those two moments I played the game without even considering the gacha aspect, and I still had fun. However, the more I think about it, the less I'm appreciative of the system in general. It's predatory and we know it. And the fact that there might be a game that's more predatory doesn't justify the system itself. Yes, you have a guaranteed weapon banner, but the signature weapon to me feels almost required, as they are extremely strong and perfectly tailored to the associated resonator. Yes, you can buy a resonance node in the shop, but that still requires lots of pull, and lots of useful buff like interruption resistance is often locked behind the first sequence. And sure, the PT is at 80, but the presence of a 50-50 is always going to be a feels bad. I would love to see either a system that prevents to lose 50-50s in a row, and perhaps, and this is completely delusional, I understand, a toggle that allows you, for instance, to change the PT from 80 to, let's say, 120, but assure you that there is no 50-50 involved. I don't know if it can be fixed or changed, but I see the potential in this game. And even if sometimes you forget about its predatory monetization, it doesn't mean that it's still not there. Then again, at least you can feel that Kuro reinvests the money it makes into the game. Oh, okay, this is gonna be a bit complicated. Let's start with an anecdote. One of the things that I loved the most in Genshin was the 4 stars. One character in particular was Thoma, that he built like a main DPS for the memes, using various combination of artifacts and weapons. It wasn't good, but it wasn't terrible either. Perhaps it was due to inexperience, but in Genshin it felt like there was quite a bit of build diversity, if you didn't care too much about being optimal. In Wuwa I always had a different vibe. You have diversity in the types of teams you can make. One combination that I liked was going Sanwa Tao Chi dual DPS to clear the 3rd floor of Tower of Adversity, making use of the basic attack buff and the quick concerto regen to force Tao Chi to deal tons of damage with her timed counter. However, especially when talking about the Sonata effects and echo sets, it feels like you're more or less locked in very few options. If you want to play Jinshi, you're probably going to go with the full Spectro set. If you want to play Shangli Yao, you're probably going to play with the full Electro set. Things like Moonlit Cloud and Rejuvenating Glow are very versatile, while things like Lingering Tunes feel like a general downgrade. Again, maybe I'm speaking out of ignorance, but the echo sets feel less like a part of a build, and more like a signature weapon in which you know which one is the definitive best in slot. This is aggravated if you think about the newest sets, with Windward Pilgrimage, Flaming Clawprint, and even something like Tidebreaking Courage feeling like only good on that one resonator. The newest one, the one meant for Frolova, at least innovates in the fact that it's a 3-piece set, but it's also probably one that only she's going to be able to use. Of course, there are exceptions. Cantarella, for instance, can flex around different sets, being a pure Avoc buffer, a coordinator attack-oriented party member, or using another variety of set to different degrees of performance. In general, I would like to see a greater variety in the Echo sets, especially with the 2-piece set bonuses, and in particular with the nature of the bonuses. Here, 4 examples of Sonata sets that I would personally make or would personally like to see in the game. Note, this is purely made out of my limited knowledge and lack of math. Call it fields crafting, it's not about the numbers, it's about the concept. You get it. Let's go with a set meant for DPSs. Let's call it Big Bonk Tunes. The 2-piece set is going to grant an impressive 20% heavy attack damage bonus, while the 5-piece set is going to grant, let's say, 12% electro damage bonus whenever you perform a heavy attack, stacking up to 2 times for 15 seconds, to a total of 24%. Now, you have a 2-piece set bonus of a typically electro set that can be used on a non-electro resonator, and a 5-piece set that can work especially well on an electro resonator that use heavy attacks. This allows for a character that have this set as the best in slot, for instance, but at the same time, since the value of its buffs is not put mostly on the 5-set combination, but it's more evenly spread, the 2-piece set bonus becomes more relevant. Let's go with another set, meant for sub-DPSs. Let's call it the old switcheroo. The 2-piece set is going to grant an extra 15 Concerto regen when using Resonance Liberation. The 5-piece set is going to grant 20% attribute damage bonus. With this idea, you have something that can work in order to trigger outro skills of those characters that struggle to generate Concerto in an efficient way, and perhaps you could commit for a 5-piece set if you care about them dealing more damage. Keep in mind, the numbers are purely to convey the idea. Let's go with another set, meant for a support. Let's call it the Wall. The 2-piece set is going to grant a 30% increase efficiency of shields created by the resonator and 10% healing bonus. The 5-piece set is going to say as follow. As long as a shield created by this resonator exists, the active resonator has their crit rate and crit damage increased by 10% each. This is the kind of echo set that I think would have great use both as a 2-piece and a 5-piece. If you care about going for more shielding, but you also care about the Concerto regen, you could mix the last 2 sets. Otherwise, you could focus on a strategy that allows you to make a shield, but use it as a buff rather than a way to tank. That extra crit rate and crit damage is useful, especially on those resonators that don't have a signature weapon that grants said stats, but could be less useful, for instance, on other resonators that easily overcap their crit anyway. Lastly, a 3-piece set meant for support and general purposes. Let's call it Ailment Vibes. The 3-piece set grants a 15% attack bonus, and the ability that if the resonator would apply 1 or more stack of Arrow Erosion, it applies 1 more, and if the resonator would apply 1 or more stacks of Frazzle, Chaff, Flare, or Burst, it applies 2 more. This is the kind of set to make more wacky builds and experiment a lot, but this is extremely theoretical since we have yet to see the extent of other negative status effect. I think I have yapped enough about echoes, so let's go to the next point. No, it's not what you think. Well, not just that. Sure, I would love to see more 4-stars, because they would be great for free-to-play and could fill in those niches that require specific abilities. We need, for instance, a Frazzle and Erosion unit among the 4-stars so that we have more variety on what the player can use, and well, how to use their respective rover. The thing is, 4-stars, in my opinion, are extremely good for world building and identity. Characters like Yan would have been able to be playable without getting much of a role in the story and still make sense. In Renacita, characters like Margarita, Rosemary and Fulmine all could have enhanced the depth not only of the gameplay but of the world itself. Seeing their skills, their profiles, and their story, it enriches the game on all fronts, and I genuinely think it's something that should have been done. Now more than ever, considering how characters are becoming a bit too much as a perfect fit for one another, having a 4-star alternative would be great. In general, a big part of a region or city's identity is dictated by their cast, and having more of a diverse cast would be just great. 4-stars Resonator do not need flashy showcases or overly complex mechanics, so it would be cheaper to make them. That doesn't mean it wouldn't be a great expense or investment. The thing is, in my opinion, especially when talking about the story, there is a middle ground between the usefulness of Bu Ling and the absence of Dan Jin. If they release a character like Margarita, it wouldn't really need much more than what we already have as side quests and dailies to make her feel integral in the game and the story. On this topic, I also want to mention the weapons. 4-star weapons generally feel underwhelming, with extremely few exceptions. I have plenty of Battle Pass weapons sitting to gather dust because they don't feel worthy the investment. I would love to see more experimental stuff, or niche things that could allow for fun builds even in the 5-star department. I think of, for instance, a new batch of 5-star standard weapons, all with stats that go all over the place, like a broad blade with energy regen, or a sword with defense percentage, or a pistol with HP percentage, and all sorts of quirky passives that could be useful to mess around with. Remember when I said that if it wasn't for my friend that was there in the early stages of the game, I would probably have quit? Yeah. Generally speaking, rewrite or not rewrite, the 1.0 story needs a rework. Not on the tale it narrates, but on how it narrates it. The incredible amount of hyper-specific terms, the slow and sluggish exposition, the cast that it's portrayed in a generally uninteresting way, and much more. Don't get me wrong, this is a personal opinion and a matter of taste, but the 1.0 story was quite painful to go through. For me, at least. The world itself is extremely fascinating. The concept of Wuthering Waves is original in its world building. The story now is showing how good it can be, but that 1.0 experience poisoned a great chunk of my enjoyment of the game. I appreciated the 1.1 arc with Jinshi, and the occasional companion quest like Anko's one. But until 2.0 I was generally unimpressed or straight up frustrated with the narrative. It was also partially my fault, as 1.0 made me switch from English dub to Japanese dub, and that inevitably led me to understand less of the story by simply missing some lines of dialogues here and there in the subtitles. On that note, I need to thank deeply Amanda Richel and Alexandra Gelf, because their performance with Carthathea, Fleur-de-Lis and Cantarella single-handedly made me switch back to the English dub and appreciate it even more. Just in time for me to witness the wonderful performance of Kaya Chen, who did an amazing job as Lupa. I hope I didn't mispronounce any of the names. I think that 1.0 made me, and perhaps other people, underestimate the potential of Wuthering Waves' story, and to this day is a major obstacle for new players that want to see the absolute cinema that the story has been for the past few months. And with that, I think I said my piece. I've stolen enough of your time. What do you think about this critique? Do you have a critique of your own for Wuthering Waves? I love to spark a civil conversation about the topic. Thank you for listening to my rant, and see you next time.